This week on Marae, damage control.
We have been let down by a small number of staff in one section of our overall offerings as an institution.
As investigations spread. Then, sweet bounty from the Ruatahuna bush.
Come and try our honey, Would you like to try some honey from the Ururoa?
And Jack, the environmental warrior.
That did pull at the heartstrings, I had to pull back the old man tears there for a while, but I didn't care. It hurt me, and I was glad to be out there with that crew to help expose these buggers.
E aku manu whititua, e aku manu tātaki tēnā koutou katoa.
Tai mai anō rā ki te pai kōrero a Marae.
Well, the fallout's begun. Government's telling all tertiary institutions they'll be under intense scrutiny following funding discrepancies unearthed at Te Whare Wānanga o Awanuiārangi and the Western Institute of Technology in Taranaki.
The Tertiary Education Commission controls $3 billion of funding, so there's plenty at stake. Soon we'll be hearing from Awanuiārangi Council spokesman Sir Wira Gardiner and the Minister of Tertiary Education, Stephen Joyce. But before we do, here's the story so far.
Donna Grant's a high-profile kapahaka expert, daughter of the late Sir Howard Morrison and the first female Warriors board member.
The Polynesian boys, the Australian boys can be more connected to what it is to be a warrior in New Zealand.
She tried to teach kaupapa Māori to the Warriors through the Hei Manaaki Tourism Certificate her whānau subcontracted from Te Whare Wānanga o Awanuiārangi.
The response from the crowd in the audience and in the television audience is, oh, oh, oe, ha. Hopefully that will be the catch cry for the Warriors.
But this course and one they delivered during Te Matatini last year are now under investigation by the Serious Fraud Office. 217 Wānanga certificates have been cancelled. Donna Grant's resigned, one staff member's been fired and more heads may roll as the Wānanga is still considering laying police complaints.
We have been let down by a small number of staff in one section of our overall offerings as an institution.
Te Awanuiārangi was forced to pay back nearly $6 million of funding after two separate investigations by the TEC and NZQA found the Wānanga had overcharged them.
We've attempted to respond absolutely straight away to the issues, to look at not just the repatriation of the dollars, but also to look at our internal processes and to make adjustments.
The Wānanga has confirmed it's also now investigating its own 3-year Bachelor of Māori Performing Arts course. It's highly popular, with nearly 900 students currently enrolled, and it's worth nearly $8 million of funding to the Wānanga.
Ko toru tau rātou ngā tauira o tō mātou tohu ngā mana whakairoa toi, mai kapahaka e whakamamairoa ana kia puta rātou I te rānei.
Many of New Zealand's top kapahaka groups are involved in this degree. The Wānanga admits it hasn't informed the students their course is under investigation. The Māori Performing Arts course at the Western Institute of Technology is also under investigation by the TEC and NZQA. Since concerns were raised there earlier this year, the acting chief executive, chief financial officer, head of Māori studies and 5 staff have all resigned. The fallout from these 2 cases has prompted a sector-wide investigation. The TEC and NZQA will focus on courses that use subcontractors, have unusually quick growth and high completion rates. There is a growing fear this investigation will focus sharply on funding for all Māori tertiary courses.
Joining me now is spokesperson for the Council of Te Whare Wānanga o Awanuiārangi, Sir Wira Gardiner. Tēnā koe e tae toku rangatira.
Kia ora, morena skari.
Was the Wānanga aware that all this was happening around the Māori Performing Arts degree?
No, it wasn't. And can I say, firstly, that we view these matters with significant concern, obviously. we understand the concerns of the government, and especially the Minister of Tertiary Education, the stakeholders and particularly our students, and the Council accepts full accountability for it, which is why when we realised this was happening, we moved as expeditiously as possible to deal with it.
How did you not know it was happening? Because sources have told us that this has been going on for years.
Well, I think we need to go back to the start of this. In December, there were a couple of complaints which came to us, and then in March, there were formal complaints to the TEC and NZQA, who then launched formal investigations, and in parallel with that we launched our own investigations using Deloitte. So a number of investigations began in March to look at what happened, what was the basis of the complaints and whether there was merit in them. And those reports were published in September.
So what support are you offering to the students? There's nearly 900 of them doing this degree.
Well, I think we need to put it in perspective. As a consequence of our investigation, along with TEC and NZQA, we took back 217 certificates, but 3,000 students have been involved in the overall program. For the 217 that did not complete the requirements of the course, we've offered them additional support to do it again and to make sure that the credibility that goes with these kinds of certificates sits behind it. For the rest of the students, we're saying to them, this is an unfortunate incident that occurred in a part of our wānanga. It does not affect the overall wānanga itself. We are confident we can move along. We just have to deal with this issue right now.
But something like this does damage the value of the degrees being offered by Māori institutions, Māori universities.
No, I don't think so. I think it strengthens it, because what it demonstrates is that systems can break down, people can do things that they ought not to do, but sooner or later, with NZQA moderating and monitoring, with TEC checking funding, and with our own internal sources, we'll pick them up. And so it's rather regrettable that it was picked up belatedly, but it's been picked up, we're on top of it, and we're going to fix it.
But do you agree that there's a loophole in the system here that's been exploited?
Well, that appears to be the case, but the investigations have not been completed yet, and I think we have to wait till those processes fully go through. And in terms of our own internal processes, we have some staff actions we need to take out and are carrying out right now, because our main concern is to get on top of it, to understand what the issues are, to fix it and to move on.
Taku rangatira, thank you very much for your time this morning. We really appreciate it. Tēnā koe.
Well, joining me now is Tertiary Education Minister Stephen Joyce. Tēnā koe. Thanks for joining us this morning. So we know that there's going to be a sector-wide investigation now, but how much focus will fall on Māori tertiary institutions?
Well, it won't be a specific focus on Māori tertiary institutions. Frankly, every institution in New Zealand has funding rules that they must meet. And that includes wānanga, PDEs, ITPs, universities, and we take the same approach with any of them that do not meet those funding rules, and that's a recovery of any funding that should not have been paid over, and if necessary, further action in terms of further investigations. And that's what's happening in this case, but it's not about Māori institutions per se.
This case is what sparked the sector-wide investigation, though, isn't it? So we won't be focusing particularly or starting with perhaps Māori tertiary education. Will it start with these particular courses or institutions?
No, it'll be, as identified in your track, it'll be about courses with certain characteristics which are very fast-growing, unusually high levels of completions and reasonably high levels of subcontracting, which is when somebody else undertakes the course from the institution. But I think it's important that the Awanuiārangi case, which is a difficult case obviously for the institution, but underlines for every institution that we have funding rules, and there's a certain amount of trust there because institutions are independent, but we expect that trust to be honoured and not honoured in the breach. And so I think it'll lead to a certain amount of tidying up across hopefully only a few institutions to make sure that...
tidy up?
Making sure that they are meeting those funding responsibilities.
I mean, but how much of it falls on the honesty, I guess, of institutions or of individuals being found out before the TEC can act?
Well, I mean, I think the TEC is entitled to expect that institutions act honestly and within the rules, but if they don't, that they will get hit pretty hard in terms of the recovery of monies and, if necessary, reporting to other agencies such as serious fraud and or the police. And the Serious Fraud Office have taken an interest in one of the cases that's been identified with Awanuiārangi, and that's entirely appropriate.
When do you think we'll hear the outcome of that?
Well, I don't have any influence over the SFO investigations. I imagine they'll do what they're required to do, and at some point they'll tell everybody where they've got to.
What's your perception here? I mean, does this undermine and affect the credibility of Māori tertiary education institutes?
No, but I think there's a risk for every institution that has an issue in this regard, is that naturally enough people will look twice at their qualifications, and they'll look twice at the institution's reputation. There's no getting away from that.
So
and Awanuiārangi will have to really re-earn the trust that it's potentially lost through this issue.
So Wira Gardiner, we just heard him saying that this will in fact strengthen those qualifications. Do you think that that is the case, or does it, you seem to be saying, it weakens them?
Well, it has an opportunity depending on how they react to it. But this is a serious issue. I mean, this is not something that we want to see in New Zealand's publicly funded and publicly owned institutions. And it's a serious issue for Awanuiārangi to get on top of, and it has damaged their reputation.
Who do you see as being the biggest losers in this?
Well, I think there's a real risk for everybody involved, obviously for the institution, but also for the students. But we do have a process. In fact, NZQA has a very strong process in terms of making sure that students have the opportunity to effectively make good. And the institutions are generally required to do that for the institutions without any further cost to the taxpayer or anybody else. So if there's a situation, let's say a PTE, for example, take it out of the current situation, which has had an issue with a qualification, then they are required to make good on that qualification by a means that the NZQA agrees with.
How did this go on for so long before it was found out?
Well, that's a question for Awanuiārangi. They really, I mean, the real question is for their internal audit procedures, why they didn't pick up that there was a problem in this regard for 4 years.
For you as well? I mean, you don't want to be handing out money willy-nilly to institutions that aren't handling it in the best and proper way.
Well, it's a concern, but again, the funding rules are there. They are very clear. There's a very clear expectations on institutions what to do. In this particular case, which was the Māori tourism qualification, changes were made that were not cleared with NZQA or TEC. So it's a case of you can't manage what you're not privy to, but it is a requirement on those institutions to do that. So it falls very clearly at the feet of Awanuiārangi. Now, tertiary institutions are very proud of their independence, and they often tell me how independent they are and how it's their job to be independent and not my job to tell them what to do every day. So they have to keep their side of the bargain, which is making sure that their institutions are up to the mark and are properly audited and properly looked after.
We have to wrap very soon, so just let's throw forward. I mean, what's the government going to do to support Māori tertiary education?
Well, I think we've got some really good things going on here at the moment. We of course, Māori generally have not performed as well as other students in the tertiary education system in the past. We have seen big lifts, which I'm excited about in the last few years in terms of performance. But I think now that we're getting a strong economic uplift, we've really got to make sure that we really ensure that every young Māori that wants to participate in the New Zealand economy with the skills that they need gets that opportunity. And our first meeting with Te Urewera Flavell last week, I think we're going to work together very well. And I think we're going to end up with some surprisingly quick improvements in results.
Oh, I hope that is the case. We're going to be talking to him very soon.
Yeah.
Minister Stephen Joyce, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Manawa, honey from the heart. That's what a new honey producing company in Ruatahuna has called its first artisan product. It's one of New Zealand's rare single source honeys, coming only from Te Urewera, so we travelled to the bush to sample a taste of success.
Nā miere o konei no Te Urewera anaki. Ana ko nā miere o te manawa ko te manawa o te ika a Maui. Ko te upoko kai pōneke, ana ko te hiku kai te taitoke rau, ana ko te manawa kai Ruatahuna. Koina nā taonga nā hua o te whenua, nā hua o te nahere. Wira nā mea ka homai hia. Ko tā te nahere ka homai, a koira nā miere ka mahi ai mātai, ka hokona ki te ao.
Ko te whakaatu i te reka o te Urewera ki te ao mā te miere. Mānuka tāwari a no te manawa o te ika anake, ka puta te mere i te māhoe. No ngā kaitiaki o te tua whenua tēnei whakaaro, iwa mano ngā heke tea whenua kai raro i o rātau na maru, 2,500 kilogramu te rahi o te mere, kua hokona e rātau.
Kua roa mātou e kimi ana i tētahi āhuatana, ka noho mātou ngā kaitiaki o te tua whenua i te ki te whakaaro me aha, me pēhea. Ana koina i te mahi ka tau nā whakaaro o mātou whakaaro, me whai e mātou, ana ko te mahi mire. Ke whiwhi ora nai nā whānau nā hapu o roto ratahuna.
Morena.
Tata ki te 300 ngā tāngata kai ruatahuna e noho ana, he kore mahi te nuinga, ara mai he pakihi hou, he huarahi hou, me era i manawa nuitia ki te kaupapa, kaua ki te utu.
Ka hāno au ki te wai atu ki wetahi o nā tānata mahi ai wēnei mahi. Kare rātau i paku aro mai ki wā mātau inoi mō tahi āwhina neha kia pai ai tā mātau whakatui i nei mahi. Enari taku waihana atu kia Dennis Watson o te Wairarapa, ko ia te mea i whakahoki pai mai kia mātau ana. Iaia wetahi pīmere, nā whare pīmere.
Make the hive out first.
Yep.
Calm the bees down. And
E rima te kau ngā pauaka pī i tā kohatia, i nāia nei ono rau wā rātau pauaka pī.
the queen lays the egg into an empty comb here.
Me te whakakuhu i a rātau anō,
Worker bees.
ki te ako i te mahi tiaki pī.
We'll put pollen and honey in for food, and then they cap it over with sort of wax.
Are they not stingy, bro?
Yep. As long as you don't handle them too roughly, they're all right.
Pai ake kia mātou ki te whakatū kaupapa pēnei i roto ratahuna. A koe rā kia mātou tētai āhuatana o te mana motuhake o nā hapu o ratahuna. Ko rātou ka riro mā rātou, rātou e whakahaere. Ko tētai āhuatana uaua i roto i tērā mahi te hoko taonga ki te tanata, me kaha anō koe i te kōrero mō te reka o tō kumara neha. Kāre hoki tērā mahi e tino pai kia mātou, mā te mea hia anō ki te āhuatana ki te reka o tā mātou kumara o te miere tēnā.
One of our events, we went to the food show and we felt we had to do some real hard sales and, sort of sometimes stand in the middle and actually bring people over or, stand behind our stand and call them over to, come and try our honey, would you like to try some honey from the Uruweras and things like that.
Aha koe e uaua kia mātai, nari kia kaha tonu, ne?
Ko te wawata nui ki aroa rawa te oranga o tā rātau pakihi, no te Urewera.
Okay, so to taste this honey from the heart, you can find it on their website www.manawahoney.co.nz or follow the link on our Facebook page. I'm just getting distracted by the ministers fixing themselves up next to me. So joining me is Ururoa Flavell of the Māori Party, who holds 3 portfolios, including Māori development, and beside him, of course, the Honourable Hekia Parata, who's kept her education portfolio. Tēnā rā kōrua.
Kia ora.
Now, first of all, Ururoa, what will you be doing because you're the Minister of Māori Development now, the new term for the Minister of Māori Affairs. What will you be doing to boost Māori businesses like the honey makers in Ruatahuna?
Well, the good thing is that we've managed to secure that associate portfolio alongside Stephen Joyce, which allows us to get in amongst that sort of development. And that's one of the key priorities was identified through the Māori Economic Development Strategy, He Kai Kei Akuringa. One of the things that I've determined pretty early on is that we've got 4 strategies sitting on the table. Māori Housing Strategy, Māori Health Strategy, Māori Language Strategy, Māori Economic Strategy. And one of the key things that I want to do is take them off the cupboard and make sure that we action them. So that fits into that sort of stuff, the ability of of our people to develop their own businesses and so on, so they do become self-sufficient, is right on the money where we want to be, because it generates hopefully mahi and utilises the resources that currently sit in our hands, and that's where we've got to be. So I'm really hoping that we can kick on the economic development strategy, and fortunately with that portfolio and working with the senior Minister Joyce, it does open up the door to all sorts of things.
And it sounds like you and Mr. Joyce will be working quite a bit together in the next 3 years, because tertiary education sector as well?
Not so much, but the good thing about the Māori development portfolio is that most people don't know that it's really wide, and so therefore you're touching every base, with education to health to housing to all across the parameters, and that's why I suppose just looking at another key priority was about addressing issues of poverty, that we're able to establish the Ministerial Committee on Poverty, which is wide-reaching, and so it's great to have the portfolio that is so wide, but it really does mean that you've got to work closely with the other ministers who, in the end, control the purse strings, and also you're able to shape policy with them. So I'm looking forward to it.
And how closely will you two be working together, Minister of Education?
Well, I think we'll continue a relationship we had prior to Te Urewera coming in this role, and I think it's fantastic that he is, and I look forward to doing so. We had a good relationship, Dr Sharples and Minister Turia and I, and of course the economic development interests that Minister Flavell is speaking about. You know, they're critically affected around how well educated and how well skilled our young people are, and we've had a very big focus on that. We've seen, you know, a 19% increase in young Māori with the minimum educational qualification. We want that to be more, and we want them to be able to see the connection to employment, to business, to entrepreneurship, and so the opportunity for us to continue to work together is very high.
For you personally, did you want to be Minister of Education for another 3 years? I mean, it's been a tough ride the last 3 years. Did you want to take that portfolio again?
I'm Marika, yes, absolutely.
Is this your Ngāti Poroutanga talking here?
Oh, well, look...
Take it on.
Well, of course, you have to be... It's not the most popular portfolio, I get that, but it is so worthwhile. And my experience, and I'm sure yours and Te Ureroa's, is that we've all had good educations. And one of the big points about education is that it should moderate background, you know, that we should have the opportunity to lift ourselves out of poverty, to be able to earn the kind of incomes that help us make choices for our families, our whānau, our hapu. And so getting a great education, I'm absolutely as motivated, if not more so, than I was in the past.
And you're both very aware of the situation around Awanuiārangi, you and your position as Minister of Education. Of course, you're down there in Te Whare, which is in our rohe, the Wānanga's there. What do you have to say about that particular situation, Te Urewera?
Well, first thing I know about all of the Wānanga is that they do the very best by our people, and over a long period of time have set out a platform that no other tertiary institution can match, simply because they've found our niche and found a kaupapa that our people relate to, and over the years have churned out thousands of students who've come out better for it. That's the first point that really needs to be made. Secondly, that the tertiary institutions over time do have some problems that come to the fore, but the good thing is that I heard this morning from Sawira, who said that basically they have a handle on it, and with people of his calibre over the top of it at the council level, taking responsibility and saying that they have it in order. I think that should give some assurance to the students and indeed to the Minister that things are being investigated. There's still some work to be done to finish that investigation, and I think we should wait and see what comes out of that investigation before passing any judgment on those Wānanga.
You must be a bit disappointed though, Hekia, with what's happened down there at Awanuiārangi?
Oh, look, I think Awanuiārangi themselves are disappointed, and they're taking every action they can to ensure the integrity of their qualifications. You know, this is a small but significant, you know, part of the Wānanga, and I think by taking that action, they're demonstrating how committed they are to the quality and integrity of all their qualifications.
Now, you're both at the top table, both back in government, so you must be both pretty happy because, you know, 3 more years, you know, making decisions, etc., etc. But Māori voters generally rejected both the National and the Māori Party in this year's election. What was that about? What's the rationale for that? Why do you think they did that?
Well, I'm pretty puzzled by it myself.
Because National's actually got more Māori MPs than Labour has, hasn't they?
Yes,
Māori went back to Labour.
Well, those on the Māori roll voted in the Māori seats. You know, I think it's a mix of things, but one of it is, I think, that I've taken as a challenge personally, is how we make sure that the story of progress that has been achieved under our government and certainly in coalition with the Māori Party, what that story of progress is at every level. And, you know, whether it's been in health or education, employment, reduction in terms of law and, you know, repeat times in jail and so forth. The story is a really good one, and I think we have to tell it more practically, more powerfully and more personally to every Māori community and iwi.
Final comment on that, Te Urewera? You've got about 30 seconds.
Okay, well, the story that was promulgated throughout the election was that we were in the pocket of the National Party, and I want to put it to you at the very start of this interview, at the end of the interview, but at the start of the term, is that the Māori Party is the independent Māori party with influence in government.
That's right.
We have the ability to vote against the national government but support the budget. And for that one vote, that single vote, then the theory is that we're able to get the benefits for our people by way of the ministerial portfolios, policy portfolios and indeed some budget. Now, if people can't see that, then we've got a serious problem, which is why we have to have the discussion around how elections and indeed Parliament works throughout the country amongst our own people, because if it's 45% of our people didn't vote, we're in serious trouble.
You don't know what 30 seconds is, do you?
It's 35.
No, but we're working together. That's the point. We're working together.
E mea kia kōrua ngā mihi nei kia kōrua I tai mai nei ki Marae tēnei ata.
Tēnā koe.
Now, unfortunately, we're unable to bring you our story on eco-warrior Jack Waldron this week, but you'll be meeting the Action Man next Sunday. Meanwhile, we went to Wellington to find a young academic who's living proof that good things come in little packages. She's Sasha Lee Douglas, a deep-thinking, wisecracking Māori punk princess.
In this Wellington house, you're never quite sure what you'll find.
This is my bass that I play in a couple bands. My flying V, eh?
Where did you get it?
Cash converters.
Sasha Lee Douglas is a member of 4 punk bands.
I've had a few album releases, the various bands that I've been in.
All of the music, is it politically focused?
A lot of it is, yeah. Roger Douglas.
You've got Teagate there.
Yeah, yeah. I think I'm attracted to like the kind of passionate aggression almost of punk.
You're a minority of a minority then, aren't you?
Yeah, yeah. Shock Futuro, which was a band that I was in a few years ago, so all the lyrics were in Spanish and stuff. So.
Really?
Yeah, so that was a really fun band.
Did you learn Spanish through it?
Not really.
Did you meet lots of Spanish people through it?
No.
But in between all the gigs, she's also found time to complete a Masters in Māori Punkology.
Coming from a punk perspective, I wanted to highlight that, you know, it's not just a white kind of domain. So I wanted to kind of explore how indigeneity is expressed today. And I think there's that kind of stigma with being Indigenous because we've got such a long and wide history that we kind of get relegated to the past. I kind of wanted to explore how culture always evolves. Punk isn't perfect, like there's still hints of racism and people just not being educated about Indigenous rights and stuff. But overall, people really found a place to belong, I guess, in punk.
In the 70s, the Sex Pistols made punk famous. But punk's been shifting and changing ever since.
When I first got into punk in Wellington, I came through like 128, which is a community centre. It was one of the places that got raided in the terror raids. We've got a song called I Terrorist. Yeah, it was just talking about being labelled as a terrorist, I guess, and unfairly. So, and it was kind of a solidarity song as well with the people who were affected by the raids. I think punk's grown from that and kind of looked at the more systematic results of government policy. I think it's a kind of nice progression into like social justice.
She's also experimenting with reo. And her band Fantails is inspired by the original Troublemaker.
Fantails, that scary little bird that got Maori killed.
Yeah, that was definitely part of it, like that whole story about Maori and bringing about mortality, and kind of has a dark side to it, but they're cute little birds at the same time, so I like that kind of juxtaposition and putting a little Māori flair on there as well.
She is too cool. Māori punk
Hard to
princess.
dance to that music too.
Well, yeah, but you don't need to. That's her job. All right, thanks for joining us.
Aotearoa ki e homa.